The night air over Cedarville carried the faint scent of rain on asphalt, and the distant hum of late-night traffic was occasionally punctuated by the bark of a dog or the squeal of a neighborhood cat. At 7:18 p.m., 17-year-old Vanessa Morales stepped off the bus at the corner of Elm Street and Willow Lane, clutching her backpack and a plastic grocery bag from the corner deli. She waved to her neighbor, Mrs. Clancy, who was returning home from a late shift at the hospital, her smile warm but distracted by the drizzle. Vanessa's walk from the bus stop to her family home, just under half a mile, was one she had taken countless times. But that Thursday, October 11, 2001, it would become the last time she was seen alive. By the time Vanessa reached the small bridge spanning Cedar Creek, the streetlights flickered as the storm clouds thickened overhead. She adjusted the straps of her backpack and pulled the hood of her jacket tighter against the wind. A dark sedan rolled slowly down Willow Lane, its headlights briefly illuminating her figure. She looked up, perhaps recognizing the driver, perhaps thinking it was one of her friends giving a ride. Whatever flashed in her mind in that instant, it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. She never made it across the street. Moments later, her backpack lay abandoned near the bridge railing, her groceries scattered, milk rolling into the gutter, a half-eaten sandwich still wrapped in wax paper, untouched. Vanessa Morales was gone. From that night onward, Cedarville was suspended in a collective disbelief. Local police launched search parties that stretched through neighborhoods, parks, and the dense woodlands lining the creek. Volunteers printed posters, distributing them door-to-door and on telephone poles, the bright colors fading under October's rain. By October 13th, the Cedarville Police Department had issued a statewide bulletin, contacting neighboring counties and dispatching officers to interview friends, classmates, teachers, and even casual acquaintances. Sheriff Daniel Harper, who oversaw the investigation, recalled years later, "We combed every alley, every field, every abandoned property within a 10-mile radius. But as the days stretched into weeks, the trail went cold." Vanessa was a high school senior at Cedarville High, a young woman whose presence lit up every room she entered. Standing at 5'6", with dark brown hair and hazel eyes, she had a quick laugh and an unrelenting curiosity. Her friends described her as fiercely independent, yet deeply empathetic, someone who noticed when a classmate was struggling, who offered quiet words of encouragement before disappearing into a corner with her sketchbook. She played flute in the school band, contributed articles to the student newspaper, and held a part-time job at the local bookstore. Her mother, Elena Morales, often recounted how Vanessa would spend weekends rearranging shelves or cataloging new arrivals, always meticulous, always methodical. The morning of October 11th had begun routinely. Vanessa's alarm went off at 6:45 a.m., and her mother remembered the usual sounds of her daughter's morning routine, the shower running, the squeak of the bedroom door, the clatter of dishes in the kitchen as she poured cereal. At school, Vanessa's teachers noticed her upbeat mood. She had completed a major art project, had been selected to present her portfolio during the school's open house, and had spoken enthusiastically to her best friend, Marissa Delaney, about her plans for college applications. By all accounts, she was a girl with her life carefully organized and full of ambition. After school, Vanessa stayed behind for an hour at the library, finishing research for an article she was writing about community initiatives to improve literacy among younger students. Around 5:45 p.m. she left, walking toward the bus stop where she would catch her ride home. Security footage from the Elm Street bus shelter captured her waiting patiently, umbrella tucked under her arm, occasionally glancing at the passing traffic. She stepped onto the bus at 6:05 p.m., chatting briefly with a friend before settling into the back seat. By 6:42 p.m., she was back at the corner of Elm and Willow, the final moments recorded only by the fading light of the street lamp. Within hours of her disappearance, officers interviewed every neighbor within sight of the route she regularly walked. Most reported nothing unusual. One resident, however, a man walking his dog, remembered a sedan with tinted windows parked near the Creek Bridge around 7:15 p.m., doors closed, engine running, but no one visible inside. He could not identify the driver. Another witness, a teenager riding his bike, claimed to have seen someone hurriedly carrying a large bag toward the tree line along Cedar Creek at approximately the same time. His description was vague, the details uncertain, but it provided the first tangible thread in a case that would remain frozen for nearly 2 decades. Days turned into weeks. By the end of October, dozens of leads had been exhausted. Police interviewed friends, classmates, and family members, searched abandoned warehouses, inspected drainage systems along the creek, and coordinated canine searches through surrounding woods. Nothing led to Vanessa. Evidence that might have been overlooked in the urgency of 2001 was carefully catalogued and stored. Her backpack, clothing, and scattered groceries were placed in sealed evidence bags, fingerprints recorded, fibers collected, and every scrap of physical trace labeled meticulously in the Cedarville Police Department's archives. Yet without suspects, these items remained silent witnesses to a crime no one could fully understand. The Morales family endured every unknowing day with a quiet, steady despair. Vanessa's father, Miguel, threw himself into his work at the local fire station to distract from the uncertainty, while Elena poured herself into community volunteer work, often speaking at school assemblies about safety and awareness, never revealing the depth of her own grief. Siblings oscillated between hope and frustration, clinging to memories and mementos, preserving her bedroom as it had been the day she vanished, textbooks stacked, sketchbooks open, the soft glow of the desk lamp casting familiar shadows. In the following years, the case would resurface sporadically. In 2005, new detectives reviewed cold cases in the county and noted the extensive preservation of Vanessa's belongings. Fibers, hair samples, and the faint remnants of a dried beverage were still intact, untouched by the decay of time. Investigators filed these observations meticulously, but technology had not yet advanced sufficiently to extract the genetic data that would later prove critical. By 2016, nearly 15 years after Vanessa's disappearance, forensic science had entered a new era. Advances in DNA sequencing, even from degraded or minute samples, opened possibilities previously unimaginable. Detectives assigned to the cold case unit revisited Vanessa's file with renewed hope, examining every preserved item, every fiber, every scrap of physical evidence. Special attention was given to cigarette butts, discarded food containers, and personal items that might have contained trace DNA from anyone who had interacted with Vanessa on the evening she vanished. The breakthrough came unexpectedly in January 2017. Technician Laura Chen, meticulously analyzing a cigarette butt recovered from near the bridge during the original investigation, discovered a partial male DNA profile. The sample had been overlooked in 2001 due to its degraded state, but now it was sufficient to create a comprehensive genetic signature. It did not match any known offender in the state database. This meant the investigation had reached a critical juncture. The suspect was likely someone who had never been arrested, never fingerprinted, never documented in a criminal registry, someone who had managed to evade justice entirely. The team decided to employ forensic genetic genealogy, a method that had recently revolutionized cold case investigations. By comparing the DNA profile to publicly available genealogical databases, investigators could identify distant relatives of the unknown suspect, mapping a family tree backward to approximate his identity. The process was painstaking. Weeks of research, cross-referencing birth records, census data, and public records yielded multiple potential family branches in New Jersey and neighboring states. By March 2017, investigators had narrowed their search to 2 possible suspects. Surveillance was discreetly established. Publicly discarded items, coffee cups, cigarette butts, and envelopes were collected to obtain confirmatory DNA without alerting the subjects. Finally, in April, the DNA from one subject matched the 2001 cigarette butt with near certainty. The revelation stunned the team. The suspect was Richard Carver, a 52-year-old resident of Cedarville, a man with no prior convictions for violent crime, but an extensive history of volunteer work at the high school, local library and youth mentorship programs. He had been a familiar, trusted presence in the community, a figure who had comforted families and organized events for decades. The initial shock reverberated through Cedarville. How could someone so respected, so integrated into daily life, be responsible for Vanessa's disappearance? Police prepared their arrest warrant carefully, mindful of the sensitivity surrounding the revelation. On April 12, 2017, Carver was approached at his home and taken into custody without incident. His DNA matched the 2001 sample with 99.999% probability. Additional searches revealed evidence that corroborated the timeline of Vanessa's abduction. Fibers from her clothing, personal items, and a small cache of belongings hidden in an outbuilding. News of the arrest spread rapidly. Local residents, many of whom had known Carver personally, struggled to reconcile their memories with the crimes revealed. Students, parents, and staff at Cedarville High were shocked. Interviews revealed a consistent pattern. Carver had inserted himself into community events related to missing persons, volunteering at searches, providing support to families, and cultivating a persona of benevolence that masked his culpability. For the Morales family, the arrest was a complex blend of relief, sorrow, and disbelief. After 16 years, they finally had a suspect in custody, someone whose actions could explain the unanswered questions that had haunted them. Yet the emotional toll of realizing that a trusted member of their community had caused Vanessa's disappearance was immense. Grief intertwined with betrayal, requiring careful navigation as they began the long process of reclaiming their daughter's narrative. The Cedarville Police Department, buoyed by the success of forensic genetic genealogy, expanded its cold case initiative. Detective Sergeant Mara Benton, lead investigator on Vanessa's file, emphasized the importance of evidence preservation and technological evolution. This case proves that even decades-old crimes can be solved if every piece of evidence is treated as critical, she explained in a press briefing. In the coming months, the State Lab continued forensic analysis, constructing a detailed timeline of Vanessa's abduction and confirming Carver's movements through the use of digital enhancement of old surveillance footage, mobile phone records, and corroborating witness statements. The findings painted a chilling picture of premeditation and exploitation, underscoring the danger posed by individuals who conceal their true intentions behind a facade of normalcy and goodwill. As Vanessa's story began to re-emerge publicly, Cedarville confronted the duality of familiarity and deception. Community support networks were mobilized, counseling offered to students and families, and local forums organized to educate about personal safety, awareness, and the signs of grooming behavior. Vanessa's friends and classmates, now adults, became advocates, ensuring that her legacy included not only remembrance but tangible steps to protect others. The arrest of Richard Carver also prompted reflection within law enforcement agencies across New Jersey. Policies were re-evaluated regarding cold case evidence storage, documentation, and interdepartmental communication. The case became an example of how patience, meticulous preservation, and the integration of modern science could solve crimes once thought permanently shrouded in mystery. And while the investigation was far from over, with court proceedings pending and the community seeking closure, the key truth remained. Vanessa Morales' disappearance, frozen in 2001, had been illuminated through the persistence of her family, the diligence of investigators, and the revolutionary application of forensic genetics. For the first time in 16 years, the Morales family had a path forward, justice, answers, and the hope that Vanessa's story would not be lost to time. The morning after Richard Carver's arrest, Cedarville felt like a town caught between relief and disbelief. News crews lined the streets outside the police station, their cameras catching the somber expressions of residents who had grown up seeing Carver as a community mentor. A familiar volunteer, a friendly neighbor. For the Morales family, the announcement was surreal. Elena Morales sat in her living room, clutching her daughter's old sketchbook, eyes red from sleepless nights and tears shed over 16 years. Miguel Morales stood beside her silent, his jaw tight, replaying the image of their daughter stepping off the bus on that fateful October evening in 2001. The arrest answered some questions, but it also opened wounds that had never fully healed. The investigation into Carver's activities intensified immediately. Detectives revisited every detail of Vanessa's final day, seeking to reconstruct the precise sequence of events. Surveillance footage from local businesses, bus stops, and the few working street cameras from 2001 was enhanced with modern technology. Investigators meticulously aligned timelines, cross-referencing witness accounts from 16 years prior with physical evidence recovered during Carver's arrest. They examined the outbuilding where items belonging to Vanessa had been found, cataloging them for forensic context. Each fiber, scrap of clothing, and personal effect was photographed, measured, and stored, forming a chain of evidence that could withstand courtroom scrutiny. Carver, initially silent during interrogation, eventually agreed to speak under the advisement of his attorney. His statements were fragmented, alternating between denial and partial admissions, yet certain details he provided corresponded precisely to evidence collected in 2001. Investigators were careful not to release these details publicly, fearing interference with the ongoing investigation and potential legal complications. Despite this, his demeanor, his willingness to speak at certain points, provided an unsettling glimpse into the mind of someone who had carefully concealed his actions for years. The forensic team also focused on the genetic evidence that had originally identified him. The cigarette butt, preserved for 16 years, had provided a partial DNA profile, but further testing of clothing fibers and a small piece of tape recovered near Cedar Creek confirmed the match. These findings formed the foundation of the case against Carver, allowing prosecutors to present a scientifically robust narrative. Genetic genealogy had provided the initial lead, but traditional forensic confirmation ensured that every detail could withstand legal challenges. Community reaction was complex. Many who had known Carver struggled to reconcile their memories of him with the reality of his crimes. Parents who had entrusted their children to his supervision at school events felt betrayed and frightened. Friends who had shared casual coffee breaks or volunteering duties experienced a mix of anger and disbelief. Cedarville, a town that prided itself on close-knit neighborhoods and mutual trust, was forced to confront the fact that appearances could be deceiving, and that someone seemingly ordinary could harbor dark intentions. In the Morales household, grief and relief coexisted. For 16 years, the family had clung to hope that Vanessa would return safely, but they had also feared the worst. Now, with a suspect identified and in custody, they faced the daunting task of processing both closure and lingering pain. Elena Morales began working with victim support services, connecting with families of other cold case victims to share experiences, coping strategies, and advocacy resources. She insisted on visiting the local high school to speak to students, not about the crime itself, but about resilience, awareness, and the importance of community vigilance. Legal preparations proceeded carefully. Prosecutors reviewed the entirety of the case, from witness statements collected in 2001 to newly discovered evidence in 2017. They ensured that every item, Vanessa's clothing, the cigarette butt, Carver's personal belongings, was properly documented and admissible in court. Experts were called to testify on forensic genetic genealogy, explaining to the jury how distant familial DNA matches had led to the identification of Carver, and how confirmatory DNA testing tied him directly to the crime scene. Meanwhile, the investigation revealed further unsettling details. Carver had maintained meticulous records of his community involvement, seemingly to build trust and credibility, and he had used this reputation to evade suspicion. He had volunteered at the library where Vanessa had spent her afternoons, had helped organize student events, and had positioned himself as a mentor figure to the town's youth. Detectives surmised that his careful cultivation of trust allowed him to operate unnoticed, and that his crimes were likely opportunistic, preying on the predictable routines of the community. Witnesses were called back to provide testimony regarding Carver's movements on the night of October 11, 2001. Their memories, though faded by time, offered crucial corroboration. A neighbor recalled seeing a figure near the creek that did not match Vanessa, and another reported a vehicle moving slowly along the street where she had disappeared. When confronted with these recollections, Carver's responses were inconsistent, further supporting the prosecution's case. The Morales family took extraordinary care to preserve Vanessa's memory during this period. They organized a small commemorative event at Cedarville High, inviting classmates, teachers, and neighbors to honor her life, her talents, and her contributions. Her art projects were displayed, photographs arranged, and stories shared of a young woman whose presence had been bright and meaningful. The event was bittersweet, a mixture of mourning and celebration, a tangible acknowledgement that her life had been lived fully, even if cut tragically short. As the legal proceedings drew closer, the town grappled with renewed attention. News outlets arrived, interviews were recorded, and the national audience took note of a case resolved through the combination of meticulous evidence preservation and modern forensic science. For the Cedarville Police Department, the case became a symbol of persistence, the potential of technology, and the enduring importance of not letting time erase accountability. Detective Sergeant Mara Benton emphasized in interviews that the case demonstrated the value. Even when a trail goes cold, we owe it to the victim and their family to keep searching, to keep questioning, and to never stop believing in justice. In preparation for trial, the prosecution compiled a comprehensive timeline of Vanessa's disappearance, Carver's movements, and the collection of evidence over the 16-year period. Forensic experts presented testimony explaining the preservation methods of the original evidence, how it remained viable for DNA extraction, and the reliability of genetic genealogy in identifying unknown suspects. They explained how Carver's DNA, never previously in any law enforcement database, was linked indirectly through familial matches, leading to his identification and confirmation. The courtroom itself was tense when proceedings began. Family members, friends, and residents packed the gallery, many holding photographs or mementos of Vanessa. Emotions ran high. Tears were common. Whispered conversations broke the silence, and the weight of 16 years of uncertainty seemed to press down on everyone present. Prosecutors outlined the sequence of events, carefully describing the initial disappearance, the preservation of evidence, the eventual identification of Carver, and the corroboration of physical and testimonial evidence. Carver, seated at the defense table, maintained a stoic expression, occasionally exchanging whispered words with his attorney. The defense argued procedural points, attempted to question the validity of genetic genealogy, and sought to contextualize Carver's past community involvement as evidence of his character. Prosecutors countered with meticulous documentation and scientific testimony, emphasizing the reliability and consistency of the evidence and the improbability of coincidental matches. For the Morales family, the trial was an emotional odyssey. They sat through days of testimony, each word stirring both sorrow and vindication. They listened to experts explain the science that had ultimately identified Carver, to neighbors recount details long forgotten, and to the narrative of their daughter's final day reconstructed with precision. Each revelation was painful but necessary, providing clarity where once there had been uncertainty. During recesses, community members gathered outside the courthouse. Conversations revolved around disbelief, fear, and the imperative to protect local youth. Many shared stories of how the town had been altered, how trust had been shaken, and how a sense of security had been irrevocably changed. Yet alongside the fear was a sense of collective resolve, a commitment to remember Vanessa, to honor her memory, and to ensure that the lessons from this tragedy would endure. Behind the scenes, investigators continued to gather supplementary evidence. Carver's personal devices were examined for additional corroboration, including digital records, email communications, and any information that could confirm the established timeline. Forensic analysis revealed minor but significant details: objects moved, locations visited, and patterns consistent with the reconstructed sequence of Vanessa's abduction. Every discovery reinforced the narrative, ensuring that the case would withstand scrutiny and that justice could be served without compromise. In Cedarville, the local newspaper dedicated special editions to the case, chronicling the 16-year journey from disappearance to arrest. Editorials discussed the evolution of forensic science, the importance of evidence preservation, and the profound impact of Carver's betrayal on the community. Letters to the editor expressed empathy for the Morales family, gratitude for law enforcement diligence, and contemplation on the vulnerabilities of small-town life. For Elena and Miguel Morales, these months were a blend of grief, relief, and cautious optimism. Counseling sessions provided coping strategies for processing the trauma, while support networks offered resources to navigate the complex emotions associated with confronting the reality of their daughter's fate. They found solace in small moments, revisiting Vanessa's artwork, organizing her sketches, sharing stories with friends who remembered her, and reflecting on the vibrant young woman she had been. As part of ongoing community healing, Cedarville schools introduced programs emphasizing safety awareness, personal boundaries, and vigilance. Teachers, administrators, and counselors collaborated with local law enforcement to educate students, creating curricula that addressed both physical safety and emotional well-being. Vanessa's name became a symbol not only of tragedy, but of resilience, prompting conversations that might prevent future incidents. The stage was now set for the final chapter of this long journey. Carver's trial was imminent, and the weight of 16 years of uncertainty and investigation rested on the courtroom proceedings. The evidence, meticulously preserved and analyzed, would form the backbone of the prosecution's case. The town of Cedarville, the Morales family, and the broader community awaited resolution, hoping that the careful application of justice would finally provide the closure that had eluded them for so long. In every conversation, every article, and every court session, Vanessa Morales's presence was felt. Though taken from the world far too soon, her story, her life, and the quest for justice endured. The case had transformed from a haunting cold case into a testament to the perseverance of family, the dedication of law enforcement, and the power of science to uncover truths once thought irretrievably lost. The courtroom was silent as the final witnesses concluded their testimony. Each word spoken seemed to echo the 16 years of uncertainty, grief, and hope that had shaped Cedarville since Vanessa Morales vanished. Prosecutors had carefully laid out the evidence: the cigarette butt preserved from the scene, the DNA analysis that ultimately pointed to Richard Carver, the corroboration of neighbors' recollections, and the sequence of events meticulously reconstructed over years of painstaking investigation. Every detail reinforced a single truth: justice had been delayed, but it had not been denied. Carver, seated at the defense table, remained largely expressionless. His attorney attempted to cast doubt on certain elements of the evidence, particularly the genetic genealogy that had initiated the breakthrough. Yet each objection was met with the methodical presentation of facts and expert testimony. Forensic scientists explained in clear and accessible terms for the jury how distant familial matches led to Carver, how confirmatory DNA testing tied him to the scene, and how the evidence had been preserved impeccably for 16 years. The Morales family watched silently, absorbing every moment. Eleanor Morales held a small photograph of Vanessa, worn at the edges, a reminder of the daughter they had lost but never stopped seeking. Miguel Morales' hand rested over hers, their fingers entwined in quiet support. For them, this trial was not merely about legal closure. It was a confrontation with the painful truth of their daughter's final hours, an acknowledgement of her life, and the long-awaited recognition of her suffering. Witnesses described Carver's calculated behavior, emphasizing how he had maintained a facade of community involvement, volunteering at schools and local events to earn trust, while secretly concealing his intentions. The jury learned of his manipulations, his meticulous planning, and his ability to operate undetected for years. Prosecutors highlighted the importance of not only forensic evidence, but also the patterns of behavior that had allowed the crime to occur. These insights underscored the danger posed by those who abuse positions of trust, a reality the community had come to grapple with painfully. Testimony from law enforcement officers detailed the painstaking process of revisiting a 16-year-old case. They recounted hours of reviewing old evidence, conducting interviews with witnesses whose memories had faded, and leveraging modern technology to enhance surveillance footage and preserve timelines. The jury was shown how perseverance, coupled with scientific innovation, had transformed a cold case into a solvable crime, emphasizing that justice can endure even when decades pass. During cross-examination, Carver's inconsistencies became increasingly apparent. When asked to explain specific actions on the day Vanessa disappeared, he hesitated, shifted in his chair, and occasionally contradicted earlier statements. Each moment highlighted the chasm between his constructed persona and the reality established through careful investigation. The prosecution's narrative, anchored in tangible evidence and corroborated memories, steadily dismantled his defense, leaving little room for doubt. For the Cedarville community, the trial revived memories long buried. Residents recounted the fear and uncertainty that had shadowed the town for years, the lingering questions that parents asked themselves every time their children left home, and the conversations that had quietly acknowledged that someone they knew could harbor a dark secret. Yet alongside this reflection was a sense of collective relief, a belief that truth, no matter how delayed, had finally been revealed. The Morales family participated actively in the proceedings, offering impact statements that conveyed both grief and resilience. Elena Morales spoke softly but firmly, recounting the loss of her daughter, the void that Vanessa's absence had created, and the strength derived from pursuing justice despite the years. Miguel Morales described the enduring uncertainty, the night spent searching for clues, and the courage it took to maintain hope in the face of overwhelming sadness. Their words resonated in the courtroom, humanizing the abstract legal process and reminding outside the courthouse, local residents gathered to express support and share reflections. Many spoke of the lessons learned, the importance of vigilance, the need to protect children, and the recognition that even seemingly safe communities can harbor unseen threats. Community leaders organized forums and safety workshops, integrating the experience into education and awareness programs. Vanessa's name became a touchstone, a symbol for resilience and the importance of vigilance, inspiring initiatives aimed at safeguarding the town's youth. As closing arguments commenced, the prosecution emphasized the breadth and consistency of the evidence. They recapitulated the timeline of Vanessa's disappearance, the DNA findings, Carver's behavior patterns, and the corroborating witness accounts. The narrative underscored that while time had passed, the facts remained unaltered. They implored the jury to consider not only the scientific certainty, but also the moral imperative, that justice, though delayed, must be served. The defense attempted to introduce doubt, citing the passage of time and potential memory degradation. They argued that community perceptions might have unfairly influenced witnesses, and questioned the novelty of genetic genealogy as a tool. However, the prosecution countered effectively, presenting expert testimony, validating the methodology, and highlighting the corroboration provided by multiple sources, leaving the jury with a coherent and compelling picture of Carver's culpability. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Silence enveloped the courtroom as the foreperson stood to announce the decision. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Richard Carver, guilty on all counts." The words reverberated, a tangible acknowledgement of justice finally delivered. The Morales family's tears flowed freely, a mix of sorrow, relief, and vindication. For the first time in 16 years, the uncertainty that had haunted them was replaced by certainty, and the weight of prolonged grief began to ease, if only slightly. Carver's sentencing followed shortly thereafter. The judge, noting the calculated nature of his actions and the profound impact on the victim's family and community, imposed a lengthy prison term without possibility of early release. The sentence reflected both the severity of the crime and the societal imperative to protect potential victims from similar harm in the future. In his remarks, the judge acknowledged the Morales family's courage and the persistence of law enforcement, emphasizing that delayed justice, while difficult, remains an essential pillar of the legal system. In the months that followed, Cedarville began a careful process of healing. Memorials were established, scholarships created in Vanessa's name, and public awareness campaigns highlighted the importance of community vigilance and evidence preservation. Local schools integrated discussions about safety, trust, and resilience into their curricula, ensuring that lessons from the tragedy extended to future generations. The Morales family continued to honor Vanessa's memory, transforming their grief into advocacy and remembrance. Elena Morales published a collection of her daughter's artwork, with proceeds supporting child safety initiatives. Miguel Morales participated in community outreach programs, sharing the family's story and emphasizing the importance of perseverance in seeking justice. Together, they became symbols of resilience, demonstrating that even in the aftermath of profound tragedy, families can reclaim agency and purpose. For law enforcement, the case reaffirmed the importance of meticulous evidence preservation, the integration of emerging technologies, and the enduring pursuit of justice. Detective Sergeant Mara Benton, reflecting on the resolution, stated, "Every case we work on is a promise to the victims and their families. Time does not diminish our responsibility. Science, dedication, and community support allow us to see these cases through. No matter how long it takes, in Cedarville, life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the shadow of the past remained, tempered now by resolution rather than uncertainty." Vanessa Morales' story, once defined by disappearance and fear, became a testament to the power of perseverance, the impact of scientific innovation in law enforcement, and the enduring importance of community support. Her name, etched in the memories of those who knew her and the hearts of a town forever changed, became synonymous with resilience, hope, and the affirmation that justice, no matter how delayed, can ultimately prevail. The case of Richard Carver closed a chapter that had remained open for 16 years, yet its lessons about vigilance, trust, and the relentless pursuit of truth continued to resonate. Cedarville would not forget Vanessa Morales, and neither would the generations inspired by her story, nor the investigators whose determination ensured that a small town's long